Welcome back, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-hostess Vanessa Hogle, and down in the chat room, our chat Shananigator Shana, shaking everything up. We have a fantastic episode up for you tonight. Brand new book released today from Haunted Road Media, Ghosts of the Black Hawk War, with Dan Norvell, Larry Eissler. So two fantastic paranormal investigators. They've done a ton of historic research on this war that people have long forgotten about. They've included, of course, all of the paranormal activity they were able to capture as well during their investigations. I have put the link down in the description, so definitely during the show, after the show, go check that out. Pick up the book. Dan and Larry, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, just to get started, here's the. We'll go ahead and pop up with the book cover here. Ghosts of the Black Hawk War, which just released today. What inspired you guys to research out this war, investigate it, and share it with the world?
Dan, you really started this first, so I'll let you handle that.
Okay. Well, when I was about probably 14 years old, my father and I were driving through Stillman Valley, Illinois, where the initial battle of the Black Hawk War kicked off. And I looked at my dad and I said, "Hey, what's that, Dad?" And he said, "There was actually a battle there." He said, "And the soldiers that died in that battle are buried in that hill." And, I was kind of like, really? And like I said, I was 14 years old. So, when I started investigating the paranormal in about 1996, I was always intrigued by the Battleground Cemetery, and just kind of started making my way over there, taking pictures and things like that. And then I kind of researched it a little bit. Well, I got married, had kids, kind of fell by the wayside for probably a good 5 years. And when I met up with Larry again, after I formed our team, Small Town Paranormal, in around 2009, it was like something kept pulling me there. It was like, my dad didn't even really know a whole lot of information on it at the time, because it was pretty much like Mike had said, it was a forgotten war. A lot of people didn't even realize that there were any battlegrounds in Illinois. And there's actually quite a few skirmishes that happened in the state of Illinois long before the Civil War. So that's kind of, I told Larry, I said, "Hey, you know what?" I said, "There was a war fought here in Illinois." And Larry goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it was called the Black Hawk War." I said, "It was between the Sauk Indians and the Illinois militia." I said, "And then later, the Federal Army of the United States came in to assist." And I said, "There's battlegrounds here that we could probably find paranormal activity on." And lo and behold, we found paranormal activity on them.
Yes, we did.
Did you find, and I'm asking this because I've also been on investigations in predominantly native land, and I have found, even though I'm native to a certain degree, I am Cherokee and Sioux, that the interaction can be a bit more on the hostile side. Did you guys run into that, or were they willing to communicate it in more of a comrade way?
From going over evidence and all the audio samples that we've had, I would say the overwhelming majority would probably be either settler or militia. I'm not really certain how many were Native American. The only time I can think of where we could have possibly had a response from Native American would have been at Black Hawk's gathering site. And that is still questionable because it was using the ghost box. We weren't 100% certain, but the way the answer came out responding to the question led us to believe it could have been.
Did you run into any EVPs or any type of vocal interaction that could have been, but maybe you possibly don't have a translator? Or have you looked into that?
Unfortunately for us, I guess is unfortunately for us, Black Hawk's British band knew fairly fluent English. They were involved in the War of 1812, fighting for the British, and they were pretty well educated for the times. So Black Hawk himself spoke very fluent English. So it's kind of difficult to tell if we were speaking with someone that was Native American that happened to speak English, or just a settler that didn't speak the greatest English.
Yeah, because I would have wondered if you would have caught communication between two Black Hawk, between two Native Americans. They wouldn't choose to speak English to each other.
No, they would not.
They would immediately go to their native tongue.
Absolutely.
So,
from everything that we have, I don't recall finding anything, but also at the same time, I probably wouldn't recognize it either. So nothing stood out to me. I don't know for you, Dan.
I do know that when we were at the gathering site, I asked if there were any Sauk warriors there, and we did get a response back on the ghost box that said Sauk. And then I said, what other tribe was up here that you guys traded with and intermingled and married with? And we got the answer Winnebago, which was a correct answer.
Right.
And then out at Wadham's Grove, I asked if there were any Sauk warriors there, and we did get the response of Sauk. But that could have been one of the militia telling us that there were Sauk warriors there.
Right.
So
could have been.
So
you're absolutely right.
For our viewers who are probably unfamiliar with this war, who was Black Hawk and what happened that this small war occurred on our soil?
Well, you want me to start, Larry, and then I'll let you finish with the nice history that you've done on him.
Go ahead.
Black Hawk was, at the time of the war, 64 years old, and back then, what people need to understand is that Illinois was the frontier. We were the Wild West before it was really even wild. Everything on the other side of the Mississippi, the Iowa side, was twice as wild as what we were. And Black Hawk and his tribe hailed out of the Rock Island area. Well, the Treaty of 1906, signed in St. Louis, right? 1906, correct, Larry?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, it was Treaty of 1906.
Treaty of St. Louis.
Yes, they some of the Sauk leaders at the time had signed that treaty, and it was Black Hawk's feeling that the treaty was signed under false pretense, and a lot of the other elders within the villages were not advised of that treaty even taking effect. So in 1832,
the treaty essentially cheated them out of some land, right?
Pretty much, they gave all their land up in that treaty for very little. I think some skins and some weapons. A lot of, I mean, the Sauk Indians did like the white man's alcohol as well. But compared to all the land that they lost in that treaty, the Indians got nothing, much like it has been throughout history. And, they pretty much told Black Hawk in 1832, this is the last time you're spending on this land. You're going to go over to Iowa, and that's where you're going to stay. And that didn't set too well with him. Like I said, he was 64 years old. He was a very, very fierce warrior. And he didn't take real kindly to that. And he organized warriors and others within the Sauk tribe, and said, let's go back to Rock Island and retake our land. And Larry, go ahead and you can finish it up.
So now that I think about it, I believe it was 1804, not 1806. That treaty. I think it was 1804.
Yeah.
But
I said 1906. I'm sorry.
You did. 1804. I think it's 1804.
Yes.
But Dan's telling of the story is actually only one version of it, because things weren't really documented very well back then. And no one's in agreement as to why Black Hawk came and crossed the Mississippi. It did happen very, very, very early on in 1832. And I believe it was April 6th, I think. And some people use that as the official starting point as the war because that's what kicked off the militia response. Others say the May date for Stillman's Run, May 14th, 1832, is the official start because that's the first battle. I lean more towards April 6th myself because that's the starting event. Now, as Dan had said, some theories are that they wanted to go back and retake Saukenuk, which is present-day Rock Island. And another theory is that they were invited to live in a neighboring village.
Lucas, can you turn that down, son?
In a neighboring village. And the original agreement was that the Sauk had to leave, but it didn't say anything about them being incorporated into other tribes that were allowed to stay. And then there's a couple other ones floating around, but those are the main two that I like because they make the most sense to me. Either they were coming back to retake what was stolen from them, essentially, right, or they found a loophole and still wanted to come back.
In the onset of it, where you say it is between the Sauk and the militia, what were the numbers of how many Sauk versus how many militia?
So that is also very much contested. Really, the main number for the Sauk is around 40, plus or minus. Black Hawk had a lot of people in his band with him that crossed over, but unfortunately, at that point in May, they were running out of food. So a lot of them were out hunting. A lot of their numbers included women and children and the elderly, and they're not going to battle. So he only had, give or take, around 40 warriors. And he sent those 40 down. And the troop that Stillman had was actually 2 units that had combined together. And that number is also somewhat contested. Some say it's around 260, some go up to 275, some say it's in the 240s. But still, compared to Black Hawk's 40, pretty sizable.
Right.
And yet federal still had to come in and aid militia, even though they outnumbered the Sauk by a great number.
So there's a funny thing about that. And I think we covered it a little bit in the book.
Yeah.
Governor John Reynolds really wanted the spotlight for this one. It would have been really good on his re-election campaign. John Reynolds, the man who stopped Black Hawk. Mm-hmm. So instead of waiting for Atkinson to show up and federalize the militia, before Atkinson got there, they were still under Reynolds' command as the governor. So Reynolds sent out this very untrained farmer militia to go and stop Black Hawk. It didn't really work out that well. So as things started to come together again after Stillman's unit was routed, then they were federalized. Now you had real soldiers coming in, and we have what happened. Black Hawk's forces were eventually pushed into Wisconsin and completely obliterated.
Oh, wow. Okay. That explains a lot.
Well, I mean, it really is a tragedy, but I think a lot of it comes to misunderstanding and what else was going on in the time too. Because we got to remember, this is the Andrew Jackson presidency. He is not a friend of Native Americans.
Right.
No.
None whatsoever. So, you know, like Dan said, the Black Hawk War is the forgotten war. But it leads to something that nobody will ever forget, and that's the Trail of Tears.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
3 major things happened around this time that really spurned Jackson into saying it's time to relocate all these natives. 1, 1832, the Black Hawk War. 2, you had the Seminole Resistance in Florida, which Chief Osceola, I can never say his name right.
Close enough.
Osceola. That lasted for a long time. And then lastly, you had the Cherokees in Georgia that tried to fight the government legally. They won. A judge sided with them. And then Jackson said pretty much, if the judge agrees with them, let him enforce it, and then kick them out anyway.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all these things are happening, including our own little Black Hawk War. And that's really what spurned the Trail of Tears here. Everyone was getting out of the way because it's time for America to shine. And it's funny how something like this can just be brushed over when it was really the footnote of something really important. And, you know, I from firsthand experience, I can say it's been brushed over because I had an American history class that ended last April in college. And it was from colonial times up to Civil War time. And it's the end of the semester. And I'm like, all right, 1832, let's go. I know all this. Brushed right over it.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And I go to the teacher, and she knows I'm writing this book, and I have to give her a copy still, actually. And I go, what gives? Where's the war? And she goes, it's not important enough, and we don't have enough time to cover it because we still have to cover all of the Civil War.
Oof.
And I'm like, this is the point we're making. It's
Yes.
the forgotten war.
It's a forgotten war.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're out there investigating, and this is something that comes up when we investigate and we're interacting with the spirits, is I believe that they want to be remembered. A lot of these people have been forgotten to time, and yet here you have a small war that has been forgotten to time. So when you're interacting with these spirits, do you think that they're more apt to try to communicate with you because you're finally somebody that's out there saying, hey, I remember you, I'd like to know more about your story and what happened to you out here?
I can say for a fact that 1832 to now, you're looking at, give or take, almost 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
Minus the whole forgetting the war thing. 200 years is a long time for somebody not to talk to you.
Yeah.
And finally, you have two fat guys roll up and want to talk to you. Let me tell you, the spirits at Stillman's Run are chatty.
Yeah.
Very chatty. Whenever we're testing equipment, we go there. We know we're going to get something. When we want to introduce our spots to people, like Dale Kazmarek.
Dale's a good guy, yeah.
He loved the Stillman's Run monument, and he got a lot of stuff there, and he was really blown away by this little tiny monument in this. How big's the town, Dan?
Stillman Valley's probably about 3,000 people, maybe 3,500.
3,500 people in this little town, and great stuff coming out of it. And it's just they went so long with everybody ignoring them, and now here we are speaking to them, and they just won't stop talking.
I bet they're like that ShamWow commercial. Oh wait, there's more.
There's always
really
more.
But let me just take a moment and just absolutely commend you guys on not going to places that tens of thousands of people have investigated. You sought out something that was important to you, and you're making it important to us. And that's really what we all should be doing. This is about communicating and educating and sharing, and you're doing that. And my hat's off to you. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I am sure that at some point we probably have talked to Sauk warriors.
Mm-hmm.
And as Larry said, they were educated enough into a certain amount of English. And as you guys well know, a lot of times when you're using the spirit box and even EVP recorders, you're a lot of times getting one word responses. But strangely enough, with the ghost box over at Stillman's Run, we've gotten phrases there. I mean, we've gotten full phrases there.
Oh yeah.
And
one of our best ones at Kellogg's Grove, the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And over at Stillman's Run, there are 12 stones there, but there's only 9 actual soldiers buried there. The other 3 are out within the countryside somewhere. They basically were buried where they fell.
Right.
So it wasn't even until, well into the 1930s, 1920s or 1930s that those 3 other stones were even added to recognize the other men that fell during that battle.
I had a document from, what's the county out there, Dan?
Over there is Hogle County.
I had an Hogle County document from a preservation society where I want to say it was like 1863 or 1883, somewhere.
He froze.
Yep, he froze.
Yep, he did.
It happens.
And this was important.
Am I back?
You're back. You're back.
The document was sometime in the 1860s, 1880s. They went and they found the 9 bodies that they currently know where they're at, and they brought them to the mass grave site. So at some point around that time frame, they were scattered too, because everybody, when they fell, you went in the ground right where you fell.
Right.
And by some miracle, the bodies were still in a state of decomposition to where, decomposition.
Yeah.
You could still see who they were.
Wow.
So they were able to say, okay, this is this person, this is this person, this is this person. Wow. These 3 are missing.
Well, and they knew who John Giles Adams was and the other soldier, because they were the only 2 that the Sauk warriors actually beheaded.
Yes, they were very, very, very mutilated.
Yes.
Wow.
And rightfully so, is a weird thing to say, but John Giles Adams was the commanding officer, and he led his very small troop in defending a hilltop, and he would be the one that has the most honor. So, I mean, it makes sense for him to be treated specially.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
He has been compared to Custer.
Really?
In many military circles, because he knew that they thought it was an overwhelming force of over 1,000 Sauk warriors coming, when really it wasn't.
Yeah.
But that's what they thought, and he took 7 other men and said, we're going to stand our ground even though we're going to die, to let these guys get back to Dixon.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And the funny thing is, I don't know if it's funny, but as they were trickling into Dixon, Illinois, which was Fort Dixon, Dixon's Ferry back then, every militiaman that came in who was asked, what happened, how many numbers did Black Hawk have, they were all giving different numbers, because nobody actually knew. This battle was under moonlight, very, very dark. We think of battle now, and we've got night vision goggles and infrared lasers and flashlights. This is musket fire. So it's dark except for the moon. You're in a prairie surrounded by woods, and all of a sudden in that dark, you see musket flash. And you don't know how many there are, but all you see is flash.
Do you think, though, that not only was it that, and I don't know why I'm getting this image, but it's one of those situations where, I caught a fish this big type of situation where when you're leaving from a particular war site like that, and you're having to go back and tell the tale, you want to make it look like you not escaped, but what you were in was extraordinary.
Yes. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that very specific thing happened.
Okay. See, I didn't know why it was coming to me, but I had to say it. And that's it. They did fish this big thing. So
yes, Major Stillman spun quite the yarn about how brave he was when he was really the coward of the battle.
Yes, he did. He actually wrote a letter to the editors of, I want to say, the Missouri Republican. Yeah. And in it, he told a fantastical tale of what happened that not a single historian to this day has yet to corroborate. Wow. He basically made it seem like he did everything that he could, and they were just so much stronger than them and tactically superior and yada 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 yada. But I'm still a hero, though. He tried his best.
Tried to spin it as well as he could. So
because you got to think, he's a military officer still, and everything
he's trying to
about
save
being
face.
A military officer, it's political.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
So we have a couple of comments here from the chat. Coyote Chris Sutton is down there, and he pointed out that the Supreme Court ordered a stay against the Cherokee removal, but Jackson ignored them. It's true.
Yep. Jackson, he didn't care.
Yeah, he didn't care. Andrew Helton says a lot of information is hidden within a lot of the county history books from around that time period of the settlers in certain areas. And so since you're talking about some of the misinformation, and Andrew makes a good point here. So what were kind of some of your resources for researching this topic and trying to find some of these facts that, like you have Stillman here, spinning a tale to try to get to some of the facts. And I know that it's hard because there's numbers that differ and things like that. So what were you guys trying to do to get to the root of the true information?
There are I don't want to say a lot, but a couple really, really good, more modern books. You know, Younger is one of them. A really, really well researched, thought out book. But unfortunately, it's really, really dry and difficult to get through. But a lot of the things that he did that I really like is, if you go to his resource section, I mean, it's almost as long as the book is.
Oh wow.
And in there, he references books that are over 100 years old that have really, really good historical accounts. So now you use that basically as your reference guide, and you start looking into these books, and then you start reading them yourself and interpreting them yourself, and adding things together that maybe they missed, or you know, me being a retired military veteran, maybe I'm going to look at it a little differently because of my background.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we did, is we started checking off these really, really, really vintage old antique books, and just trying to compile everything together from that.
Okay.
We did go to quite a few historical societies. The one in McHenry County, which is nowhere near the Battle of Stoneman's Run, actually yielded quite a lot of useful stuff. So, you know, because you got to think, these were militiamen, but they weren't from that specific spot. They all funneled in from the surrounding area. Well, the survivors, what do? They eventually go home, and they write letters, and they write journals, and then that passes down through their family, blah 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 blah, and that family now lives in the neighboring county. So you never know where that stuff's going to end up. So in
Did
searching
you come across
those
some of
neighboring
those
counties,
journals?
unfortunately, no. A lot of that old stuff, they're in the process of digitizing,
Okay.
and we weren't able to get our hands on a lot of it. A lot of it was sent down to the state archive, and we just were unable to get to the state archive.
Okay.
Yeah, they wanted us to put in a week in advance to set up a time to get there, and a lot of the times that we were able to get there were not even feasible for us to go down there. They wanted to give us hour increments at a time. Well, I'm not going to drive 4 hours to spend 1 hour at the state archive.
Right.
So
they definitely don't make it easy.
Where is that? Is that the Lincoln Library there in Springfield?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well,
I'm sure they have an amazing catalog of incredible things, but if it's hard to get to,
yeah,
you know.
Well, that's just it. I think, I personally, and it's not that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I am. I think that they make it harder because for the majority, even people who, I mean, that are alive today that wouldn't have anything to do with it back then, don't have anything to lose, still feel like their race or their rank or whatever is going to be affected negatively if the truth comes out.
Absolutely. And you still see that nowadays.
Absolutely. And it's frustrating because, I mean, I'm from the South. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. I live in Norman, Oklahoma. I can guarantee you that the history books are different in Alabama than they are here. They're going to be different here than they are in Michigan. They're going to be different in Michigan than they are in California.
Absolutely.
It's the same history.
Right.
But based on region, it's told differently.
Yep. There is that saying that history is written by the victor.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
who knows what really happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I had a completely different question for Larry, but if you want to follow up on something there, Dan, go ahead.
No, something that Vanessa said earlier, and I kind of wanted to bring up. Vanessa said she liked how we kind of stayed in our own backyard. We do a video series called Expedition Entity that's on Paranormal Warehouse. And that's what that whole concept of Expedition Entity is. Because like Vanessa pointed out, I don't have to go to Waverly Hills. I have many friends that have investigated Waverly Hills that I trust. I already know it's haunted. I don't have to go down there and have Larry shoot footage of me doing the same things that 10,000 other people have done.
Right.
It's also a tad overpriced.
That's true too.
I mean, come on.
A little bit.
But how many guys have went to the Black Hawk war sites now besides us and the time we took Dale there? And now there's a couple other people kind of filtering over there going, these guys are onto something.
Travis, Holly.
Yeah, there's
mean-
really nobody. There's really nobody spending any time at these sites, and
That's how we felt about Sailor's Creek in Virginia.
yeah,
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
beat
A lot of
the
these places
salt
get
and
forgotten
pepper.
about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Well,
you know,
you know,
I find it commendable that you guys are, you know, making sure that something that like we started off with that's been forgotten to time, that you guys are doing something to remember these people, Native Americans and the you know, the Americans, the militia that fought there. So, Larry, what I wanted to ask you is, and Dan, are you prior military as well?
no, I never served in the military. Unfortunately, I almost did twice.
Okay. But Larry did, right?
Larry did. Yeah, I
Okay.
actually spent 16 years in the fire service.
Oh, okay. Well, still, all right.
Damn.
But Larry being, and thank you, Dan. But
Yes,
Larry
very
being
much.
prior military, were you able to maybe connect with some of the military spirits on that kind of a level, being, you know, maybe warrior to warrior?
I'd like to think so. I have no difficulty communicating with spirits at any of these sites. I just choose not to, simply because I have to make sure that something looks good for the camera. So usually Dan's in front of the camera, but there's a lot of times where we're not recording and we're just there, and I do get a chance to talk a lot. And I always get responses. You know, I never feel like, you know, oh well, they're just not talking to me today. Something always happens. So I'd like to think that that connection's being made. I just have no proof of it, I guess I could say.
Don't need it. Don't
I mean-
need it. I want to expand on something Mike just said. And one thing that I had found at Sailor's Creek when I was in Virginia, did you run across any of the deceased military at that site, or any other site for that matter, that had mixed feelings about what they had to do there? Any type of remorse? Did you run across anything like that?
Dan, you want to do that one?
Yeah, actually, not so much remorse, because those men were honored to die so the rest of them could get away.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of on that line, we've asked several times, do you think that Isaiah Stillman was a coward? And time and time again, we get the response of, yes, he was a coward.
Wow.
They are not a fan.
They are not a fan of Major Stillman.
Right.
Any true leader has to be willing to do exactly what he's asking others to do. And
The
Exactly.
captain needs
Yes.
to go down with the ship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh,
And
definitely.
if he
Yeah.
wasn't, he's yellow.
And in this case, the captain did go down, and Stillman Valley, Illinois should be named Adams Valley, Illinois.
Absolutely.
Oh. There
So
you go.
You want to explain that a little bit for the viewers?
Captain John Giles Adams was the officer that stayed behind to defend the hill. So if the captain goes down with the ship, in this case, the captain did. I don't know why they chose Major Isaiah Stillman to name the town after, but it should have been named after Captain Adams. So instead of Stillman Valley, should have been Adams Valley.
As you stated earlier, political.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he was a
unfortunately.
major, and he embellished his story. So, oh well, let's name a town after him.
Right.
And his military career did continue on after this too. So
Yes,
I mean, political, yeah, for sure.
How long did you remain in the military?
That I'm not 100% certain of. I tried not to go too far outside of the time frame that we're in. The only thing that we really studied after the war, which didn't make it into this book because this is only for Illinois,
Okay.
was Black Hawk's, I don't want to call it a parade, but he was basically paraded around and was basically their trophy. Not necessarily a part of the war, but a result of the war. So we did look into that quite a bit. And then it really stopped there. But, you know, in researching Stillman and whatnot, I do know that he did continue on and had more of a military career. So I don't think he suffered very many ill effects from this defeat.
Unfortunately.
Gotcha.
One of the things that we hear quite often when you're talking about Native American spirits is that if they died in a way that was deemed less than satisfactory to them, or if their land was taken by a battle fought right there and they perished and it was taken, that there are repercussions for anyone who resides on that land after the fact. You hear that a lot, whether it's a tall tale, whether it's a fact, nobody knows for certain. Did you run into any research that indicated that happening there, or the exact opposite?
Could you ask that one again?
The-
Or you got this one, Dan?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
The funny thing is that, you know, I've been out there probably 3 times as much as Larry has.
It's a far drive for me.
It is a far drive for him. But there was a couple times that my brother and I were out there. Our good friend Randy and I were out there. And some of the locals in the summertime would be walking through. What are you guys doing? Well, we're ghost hunting. And then, of course, my house is right over there, and it's haunted as heck. My house is over there. It's haunted as heck. My house is over. So all the houses that are built, I mean, this memorial is right smack dab in the middle of town. Literally, what, Larry, 50 yards off of Route 72,
Maybe.
which is one of the main roads through, turns into Higgins Road in Chicago. You know, it's right in a residential area, and many of the residents that live around there are telling us, you know, as they're walking by going, what is he doing with that little box? Or what am I hearing? Oh, well, my house is haunted. And many of the houses in that area are. Now, I don't know if they're, you know, Sauk warriors acting out. I don't know if they're militia.
You'd have to start investigating all those houses.
Yeah.
There you go.
You would have to start.
Yeah.
Yes.
And per team rule, we stay away from residentials as much as possible.
Interesting.
We try to as much as we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
We try very, very hard to stick to public things like what we did here, or I prefer museums myself.
Just personal
businesses.
preference.
A lot of times when you have something like a residential, they expect a lot out of you. You know, they expect you to come in and solve the problem right then and there.
Yeah.
And then leave with a steaming trap.
Steaming trap.
Like on Ghost,
Yeah.
or on Ghostbusters.
Right.
And that doesn't happen.
When we used to do residentials, there'd be a spirit in the house where, you know, it was just curious, and it was kind of poking around and just kind of wanting attention. Your typical spirit, right? Yeah. And you explain it to the people and they go, well, you know, it's scaring my kids. I want it out now. And it's like, it doesn't want to leave. And I really can't force it to leave. And if I do, that's probably worse than letting it stay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with cohabitation.
A lot of people get along with ghosts and spirits in their house just fine. They come to a mutual agreement. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, there are plenty of people have that rule. You can go anywhere in the house that you want except the bathroom and the bedroom.
Right. Yeah.
I don't care. Don't break my stuff. If you want to hang out, sit on the couch, go ahead. Fine. Stay out of my bedroom. Stay out of my closet. Stay out of my bathroom.
Leave my TV remote alone.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
You watch TV when I'm not around, but when I'm here, it's mine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Don't turn it off on me. Let it play.
No pay-per-view channels.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm not paying for that.
So, we had a question here from Fran Molino. When war broke out, is it true the hereditary chief got replaced by chiefs who had experience in war? And did you have any chiefs who lost their position respond?
With that one, I'm not 100% certain. I know for the War of 1812, Black Hawk, who wasn't a chief, and his British band responded and fought for the British. So it's hard to say if they're replacing chiefs. Dan, do you know anything about that?
Black Hawk actually achieved the rank of general in the British Army for the unit that he was in charge of.
But he didn't replace Keokuk as
he didn't replace anybody. Like no, he was basically a general over the Sauk warriors that he was in charge of. Which during the War of 1812, Black Hawk stood ready with his warriors, all outfitted with, you know, muskets and everything, and they never used them. So he pretty much told the British, you know, we're ready to fight. If you're not going to use us, we're going to go home because there's crops to get put in. And that's what they did. And but they still, they held him in very high regard.
Right. But he didn't become a chief because of his experience in 1812.
He was actually never a chief.
Right. So I'm not certain how to answer that question other than I don't know, potentially not.
Valid answer.
Yeah.
I mean, with the example of Blackhawk, I don't think so. But again, every tribe is different. Mm-hmm. They all have different rules. Even when they live right next to each other, their rules could be polar opposites. So one might,
the rules
and
fit
one
the
might
community
not.
that's there. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And Saukenok was for the time a modern city almost. So they did things very, very differently than your typical Native American tribe did. It was a large city too, compared to smaller gatherings. So how they did things was probably different than, other factions of the Sauk too.
And I have to ask you, and this might seem like a silly question, but based on what you just said, with them being a much larger city, probably from what I'm understanding, a much more civilized.
Yes.
Compared to others. Why was it resources of the land?
Well, you gotta imagine starting east, and mm-hmm. you start filling up the colonies. They become mm-hmm. states. They start filling up. Everybody has land. Everybody wants land. You have Europeans that still continue to come over. Mm-hmm. They want land. Keep moving west. Keep moving west. Keep moving west. All of a sudden, you're at Saukenok, and you still want land. And you can see their farms, and you're like, wow, these are great farms. Well, they're mine now.
Because the general argument is I say we, and I use that term loosely because, like I said, I'm part Native American, but the whites fought the natives because they consider them savages. These sound like exactly opposite of that.
There was a lot of cases where a lot of tribes and settlers interact with each other fairly amicably. Mm-hmm. They did a little bit of trading. Mm-hmm. But one instance that really upset Blackhawk was when they were basically out and Saukenok was more or less emptied, and they came back, and there were settlers living all over the place. They had essentially taken over.
Right.
One of his biggest problems was, and this is what I got from reading his autobiography, is that was where all of his ancestors were buried.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as you well know, your ancestry being on a sacred ground is a big thing to the Indian, the whole Indian nation.
Oh, absolutely.
And they just moved in, like Larry said, they went off to do their hunting and then come back and take out the crops. And lo and behold, there's a bunch of settlers there. And that did not set well with Blackhawk and his band. And
there were a lot of disputes, a lot of fighting.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had down the river, Chief Keokuk, who is basically, Blackhawk referred to him as the friend of the white man, who kept telling Blackhawk, you need to just kind of mellow out and let what's going to happen is going to happen. Well, that's all fine and dandy, because Blackhawk is having to leave his ancestors' burial ground and where he grew up and loved his land, mm-hmm. and being pushed out. Well, Keokuk, I think he died before his part of the tribe ever was affected further on down the river.
So he honestly didn't care.
So he,
pretty much.
Yeah, he was kind of oblivious, really, to what was truly happening. It sounds like
there is an argument that he also saw the writing on the wall too. He knew that the white man, the United States government, was gonna get their way, and the more that we fought them, the more of our people could die. So he was trying to placate them as much as possible. And unfortunately, because Keokuk and Blackhawk often butted heads, it didn't really work out that well.
Right.
Well, and so people understand the importance of the burial grounds, the sacred sites. What a lot of people don't know about Native Americans, in many of the tribes, every piece of you has to be buried together in order for you to be able to rest in peace. Every piece. So if you have settlers coming in and they're digging up land to plant their own crops, or moving things around, or doing this, that, and the other, and disturbing that sacred land, there's a very real possibility that they're disturbing actual burial sites and separating bodies.
Oh, absolutely.
That is a huge no-no. I worked for an Indian tribe for 2 years recently, and if we so much as extracted a tooth, it had to be handed over, because when they pass, that tooth, even if it's out in pieces, has to be buried with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Unfortunately, there was a really tragic story in Rockford long time ago, and I don't know the date of when they did it, but they were bulldozing for a park and discovered a lot of burial mounds in this particular park, and just bulldozed it right into the river.
Oh no.
And a friend of ours is a psychic, and she has a really hard time going to that park because the spirits are angry.
Of course.
I'm sure. Yeah.
They are angry.
Yeah, there's
Absolutely.
so much around our nation of different, not even necessarily burial mounds, but just different ceremonial mounds and earthworks that we may not even know what their function was, but had been just completely, flattened to make way for farmland. And so, throughout the entire Midwest, you have these angry spirits running around because of the desecration across the land. And there's we just have like a very, very small fraction left of what was there. I mean, fortunately, for us, we're right down the street from Cahokia, but
the mounds in Cahokia,
which are really cool to go up there. But you get up to the top and it's like, oh yeah, there's a highway going right by it. It's kind of crazy.
Yes.
So
unfortunately, the problems that they had back then are still the problems of today. That's valuable space. I want to build on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Luckily
Exactly
today
right.
we have a lot of people that fight to preserve these things.
Right.
So
right. It's just we lost so much getting to this point where we are, finally starting to preserve these things, but got to hang on to what we still have left.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
so much different in Europe. There's a mutual respect for so many of these areas that they remain taken care of and relatively untouched.
Right.
We don't see that here. Mike was talking about earthworks. I've been all over the country. I've gotten to see one. I got to see it in Virginia, and I had to be told what it was. I'd never even been taught what that was.
Yeah. I know in Rockford they have the one burial mound over by Tinker Swiss Cottage, and that one's a confirmed burial mound. And then they have the effigy mounds in Beatty Park, which I still cannot believe are there because there's no remains in them, and I still can't believe the city didn't try to bulldoze them. I'm glad they're still there, but outside of that, really isn't a whole lot.
Yeah, Coyote Chris Sutton makes a remark down there in chat. At one time, St. Louis was called the Mound City. There is one left.
Yeah.
That's a real shame. Let me guys ask you this real quick as we kind of wind down to the end of the show. So the beginning of your book, let me pop up the book cover again here. Whoops. There you go. There's the cover. And I do have, for those that are new to watching, I do have the link to the book down in the description area, so you can go and grab it.
Do you have a picture handy of the back cover?
I can bring up the full cover here in a little bit, which I'll do. But you guys basically prelude the book with the Battle of Tippecanoe, which was in Ohio. So how did the ramifications of that battle play into the Black Hawk War?
That one escapes me.
You're the one who wrote that part.
I did write that part, actually. But I wrote that part like a year and a half ago, and now I'm drawing a blank on it.
Oh, wow. You're so brilliant.
I know. I started school 2 days ago, and I'm already starting to cram new stuff in. So it's like I gotta move other stuff out.
And what's funny, Mike, is Larry and I were talking yesterday. 10 years ago, I could spit dates and everything out off the top of my head, and the older I get, the worse it becomes.
Right.
Somebody will ask me a question, and I will go blank and go, I don't know.
I just tell them my hamster's not running at full speed.
There you go.
My hamster's definitely on half.
Yeah.
This show started, and I was like, this hour, I can't wait for this hour to be up because I'm ready to go to bed already. And it was like 7:30.
Oh, geez.
And he preached to that choir.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Right.
now
So
that you have
there's
the
the full
cover,
cover. Yeah.
I just want to point out that back cover is one of the best covers, period, that I've ever seen. I love what you did with the back cover.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know, for Dan and I, the Stillman's defeat, the Battle of Stillman's Run, and the monument site was really what got us started. And we wanted that memorialized somewhere on the book. And I think the way that you did it was awesome.
Yeah,
It
I
is
remember we
absolutely
had that discussion. It was just recently here because it was kind of under the gun for a lot of different things, and I was like, man, I need to get the back cover finished. And we had some back and forth about it, and I couldn't quite get the Stillman's monument on the front the right way. So the monument here is Kellogg's, but
Yes.
yeah, I knew you still wanted Stillman's on there, and so I was like, I can work it on the back cover, and yeah, it worked out.
I think it turned out great.
Yeah.
It worked out
It's
beautiful.
pretty awesome that way.
Because it almost looks like it and honestly, I kind of like it, even though, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I like how you have the field here at Kellogg's, and it looks like the headstones from Stillman's there is coming up out of the ground.
It's kind of ghosty looking too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
I
go
like
ahead and shoot, Mike. That was so wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
God.
I know it sounds corny, and this is coming from the person that probably reread this book 10 times before we sent it to you. But I can't wait to hold it in my hands and read it.
Oh, no, I totally get it. I totally get it.
It is a different feel to hold it and read it than to watch it go by on your computer screen.
Yeah.
Is this your first book?
This is my second,
Okay.
and Dan's fourth.
Okay.
Fifth,
Actually, my sixth.
sixth.
Okay.
I was way off.
I was about to say, it just gets so much better. Each
Yeah.
time it gets so much better.
Our first book was more of a sciencey theory book,
hmm
and was as dry can be because I did most of the writing on it, and I'm a dry writer. Dan had to come in afterwards and punch it up a little bit with personal stories to make it not so dry. So this
Gotcha.
is my first book that's not like super sciencey.
hmm
So for me, this is a big deal. And then for Dan, this is your first book that's not a storybook, right?
Fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides our theories book, this, because I like to write ghost stories, and all my stories are written from the ghost perspective. So you're getting the story from the ghost, not the other people. So you're getting what the ghost is observing. You're getting what the ghost is feeling. You're getting what the ghost is, dealing with at a certain time point within their existence after death. And for me to pull, because I'm a pretty good storyteller, but for me to pull it and make it into, to pull. And Mike, I think I sent you an email, or no, I sent you a message about 8 months ago, and I told you what a issue I was having with it, because
Mhm. I'm
I'm a fictional writer,
Right.
and for me to try to put fact into a story was very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I did pull it off.
Yeah.
I don't know if I pulled it off as good as I could have, but that was the best I could do.
I
being
can't
a
wait to
fiction
read it.
writer.
I can't wait for you to read it.
Yeah. See, I'm the exact opposite. Larry, I'm like you. I am a nonfiction writer.
Yep.
I am. I don't have to make anybody talk because it's just me. So kudos
Right.
to you for being able to
Right.
do. It's not my game.
I'm getting my bachelor's in history right now, and
Mhm.
and we're signing up for courses, and I'm like, this sounds great. This sounds great. This sounds great. Wait, I can't take this many in one semester. What do I do?
You only have so much time.
I only have so much time. So yeah. I'm looking forward to getting to our second edition for this book, which we kind of talked about a little bit, Mike.
Mhm.
Going back over the next year here, revisiting some of the thinner sites where we didn't catch much, or we didn't have enough time to go back and repeat visits because they're kind of far away.
Right.
And then adding that, and then the second book, which would technically be the third, whatever, the whole state of Wisconsin and the battles there.
Oh wow.
Because, when you think about the story here for Illinois, yeah, it's pretty tragic. But for Wisconsin, you're talking about total decimation.
Yeah, wait until you guys hear about the Battle of Bad Axe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you reference it a couple times within the book, but I guess you'll flesh that out more.
It's rough.
Okay.
I mean, even from a military perspective, it was a little overkill.
Wow. Okay.
So, but yeah, so we're gonna take the time to do all this and enjoy it, and then we got that one book that I was telling you about in that one email for Dan. So
Right. And so we also need to talk to you because Chris Sutton mentioned it down there. We need to talk to you guys about Haunted Road Media Paracon because we just announced the dates for that, and you guys are Haunted Road Media authors now, so we need to get you guys out there. That's June 13th. Can you make it? We're live right now, putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Larry can make it.
I should be able to.
It's fun.
Yeah. I am a correctional officer, and we pick our dates 6 months in advance, and other senior officers have already picked that weekend before I was able to.
And that was like 8 months in advance when he tried.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if I say, well, I'm going to the Paracon, they will say, then you can stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm in pediatric dental assisting, and I work for a corporation because I see underserved children. I've already put in all of my days off for this year.
Yeah.
I have to.
I want to put it in. Now, do you have something else the first weekend of June as well?
No, that was last year. We did it the first weekend of June. So it depends on the available dates at Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, which is where we hold it. And so that was it was first week of June last year, and then it's, I guess, what is that, the second weekend of June this year? It's the 13th.
Unfortunately, unless somebody gives a day back, I probably will not be able to get down there.
Okay.
And I was going to come over when you were in DeKalb, Mike, just to meet up with you.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Something fell through that day too, to where I had some stuff come up. So, and that's the problem of working. I kind of went from the fire service to law enforcement, and unfortunately, it's a very demanding thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Neither one are very forgiving with your time off.
They're not.
No.
Yeah. Luckily, I have a lot more flexibility, so there's a good chance I can probably make it.
Well, that would be fantastic if you could, and and represent the new book, and that would be great to have you there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially since it's local to Illinois, so people would scarf that right up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike's a good papa. He likes to get everybody together.
Yeah.
Our next adventure is going to be learning how to convince people to sell the book in their stores. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Just start fitting it there. Hit your local, hit your coffee shops and your delis, believe it or not.
We have a store in Rockford that's kind of like a weird odds and ends kind of store. And they have other paranormal books there, and they're already said that they would put ours in there in a heartbeat.
Oh, great.
So
Fantastic.
we're like, yes, first one. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we're getting down to the end of the show here. A couple minutes left. So how can everybody find you guys?
Dan, go.
You can find us on Facebook at the Ghost Hunter Dan Norvell Project. You can find us on YouTube at the Ghost Hunter Dan Norvell Project. Instagram, same thing. Website, www.ghosthunterdannorvell.com. And we are also on Twitter, although, I only use Twitter when we're doing live investigations.
Maybe.
Nobody uses Twitter anymore except for the president.
Yeah.
And Larry?
All the same places.
Okay. Very cool.
I mostly run the emails, and Dan takes care of the Facebook. So if you message on Facebook, you're 9 times out of 10 going to get him, unless you specifically ask for me, or he says, I don't know, let me go get Larry to answer that. So that's really the best way to know for sure if you're talking to Dan is to message us on Facebook. But otherwise,
which Larry's gonna be giving you an answer to your question, Mike, in your chat, probably after the fact with the Tippy Canoe question.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go look that up now.
Yeah.
Why?
Yep.
Or maybe I'll just go back and read it and be like,
it's in the book. Yeah. It's in the introduction. So.
And if, it's one of those things where it's like, I wrote that so long ago. Why did I put that in there?
I know why.
Well, it actually connected with me. This is like really a thing we should take on the side, but I'll mention it here anyway. To me, it hit me because when I was a kid and I was at my grandparents' house and I wanted to, scare my sister and my cousin and all that stuff, I wanted to find something that was somewhat local that I could create like a ghost story out of. And I just stumbled across the Battle of Tippecanoe, which isn't really close to my grandparents' house at all, but I had the Great Prophet Tinsquatawa was the actual ghost that was haunting, and then I actually worked in the ghost of William Henry Harrison, who became our president, and all of that. And so when you included that there, I was like, oh, great, it's something, with the universe, whatever.
It was fate.
Yeah, exactly. So it was cool. It struck a chord with me, so I was like, oh, cool. All right, this is in here. So in any case,
he was actually talking about that on the last show.
Oh, right.
Oh, we did that on the rabbit pellet. Yeah.
That's right. That's what it was.
That was on the rabbit pellet. So, all right, guys, we'll go ahead and let you go. Everybody, the link is down there in the description to get the new book, Ghosts of the Black Hawk War. We'll go ahead and let these two gentlemen go, and we'll get to all the shout outs. So, Dan and Larry, thank you very much for coming on tonight. Absolutely appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right.